Love that intro music. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. We're glad that you could all join us for another episode of Demystifying AI. For those of you who might be tuning in for the first time, my name is Will Dowling. I'm a product marketing manager here at ConnectWise, and I'm the host of the show. And with me, I have some really awesome people, one of which you haven't met yet before. So, Bobby, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Bobby Kuzma. I'm a recovering MSP turned offensive security practitioner. Been doing security work for almost 20 years and getting paid for it. Doing it primarily for the last 10.
Awesome, man. So yeah, our theme today is going to be AI and security. And to that note, I believe this shady character over here has decided to dress the role.
Is my voice changer working?
No, Kyle, I don't think your voice changer is working.
All right. I thought since we were having a security practitioner in here, I'd dress the part. But, excited for this conversation. Legitimately, known Bobby for many years. Bobby, as an MSP, was always willing to talk. It was always great to have somebody other end to give the MSP's perspective. So I always loved that about him. And then when he moved on, we stayed in contact and kept up with him. And the fact that as a security practitioner, the things that you do, I've done some of them, and they're awesome and scary all in the same boat. Like there's nothing like walking into a building with a get out of jail free letter in your pocket because you're about to pwn them, right? It's such a rush. I love that about your job. That's great. I'm really excited about this, and then how this impacts how AI is rapidly becoming just a multiplier in what you guys do. So we'll get into that. Really excited. And then over here, we got Mr. AI himself.
Indeed, Mr. AI. That's his new tagline.
Oh, I like it. Keith Sartain, Senior Director of IT here. So I manage all the most of the internal IT things at Classic IT, plus some DevOps and RPA and things like that for ConnectWise. Been here about 6 years and been delving and trying to contribute and evangelize AI to the extent possible.
To the extent that we dragged you onto this show to evangelize AI with us. I love it.
Bobby, I should have warned you ahead of time. Something will be said during this session, and Will make a joke about it, and then it'll become a thing. Like I like My Little Pony.
How much is My Little Pony stuff have you gotten recently?
It's not even funny anymore.
Kyle loves My Little Pony. Make sure you send him all of the My Little Pony things.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, happy to help, man. So, Bobby, we kind of like to start things off a little bit talking about what's got you excited this week. So tell me, what's got you excited this week?
Well, there was a preprint paper that dropped from a lab at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, HAL 9000's birthplace.
Right.
Demonstrating the both cost and time effectiveness of using a suite of LLM-driven agents for zero-day vulnerability discovery in web applications.
Whoa.
Wow.
So I'm pretty excited to see where that lab is going with that concept.
I'm loving the faces of the two people to your right as you're talking about this one. I'm sure they want to weigh in on that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, oh my goodness. It's too soon. Honestly, it's just too soon. I mean, that's great. And it's scary. Again, we get the two sides of the coin. We start having security conversations, like disclosures right here. Let's get into the disclosure conversation.
Yeah.
Are they good? Or are they bad? Well, they're good because they keep companies, responsible for what's actually going on behind the scenes with their application, their software. Great. They're bad because as soon as you disclose, you let everybody know there's this thing out there in the wild. So
it's the standard consultant's answer, right? It depends.
That's true. And I get, there you go. Right there. It depends. We can't give you an answer. It's maybe.
And I think realistically, I think we talked a little bit last time about, that's, we kind of got the arms race about to happen. And if the bad guys get the tools, who's ready? How many, what percentage of people, if they're hosting their own model, really know what the implications and how that might be vulnerable. I feel like it's the night, for us that tried to put a server on the internet in the 90s. No matter what you thought you knew, you didn't know, right? And all of us had something happen, in that boom and that rush to differentiate on the new technology. And then we all got something shiny. It hasn't really bit us yet. Sometimes it hallucinates, but now we've got tools to do some things that are that could be used for good, could be used for bad, but might start a little bit of an industry that has to catch up quickly.
So now that we've talked about two things that have you guys terrified, Kyle, what's got you excited this week, man?
Well, I mean, we can't not talk about Apple and what they announced. So Apple Intelligence, what a great name, right? AI with AI. Siri's getting a new brain, and it sounds like that brain is going to be, somewhat funded and functional because of OpenAI, because they also announced a partnership with them. So not too much of a big surprise there, right? They needed a better engine behind Siri, and for some of the functionality, they're going to get that a la OpenAI. That's awesome. There's a lot of cool things in those announcements. There's cool features and functions that are going to come to the average consumer. So MSPs should pay attention to anytime Apple or Microsoft talks, we have to pay attention. And then, there's little fun things. Like some of these technologies are fantastic. We've talked about voice cloning, and I'm sure we'll get to some of that today. But the Hollywood studios are now going to start leveraging voice cloning for voiceover. I mean, they're going to for voiceover and for closed captioning. So again, the good, the bad, the reality is we're not here to determine, to truly weigh out whether or not this is a good or bad decision by the studios, but they've recognized an opportunity and value for them. And I just find it appealing, or at least interesting, that the technology is at a place that they're willing to lean on it for that. Like that's pretty cool. And then, hey, we're coming up on the election. We've already seen hints of some international influences with deepfakes.
Get ready for all of the deepfakes.
Yeah, I mean, tonight there's a big hoopla, some shenanigans going on here in the U.S. But we're in the season now, so I think it's going to be interesting to see how AI becomes a part of the conversation, or at least the influence of that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's not going to happen.
And all this has happened before. All of it will happen again.
Even the politicization of, is AI too fast? Should it be regulated?
Yeah.
I fear that gets to become an election topic, and one party picks a side. I hope we stay rational if that happens.
Politics, rational?
Well, yeah, that's
okay.
naive.
Mr. AI.
I guess, yeah.
What's got you excited about the world of AI this week?
A few things. I briefly mentioned Claude 3.5 Sonnet, a mid-sized model that's outperforming 4.0. I think we're going to do this series long enough that we're probably going to say that again and again, the new fastest thing, new best thing, whatever. But yeah, that's the new bestest, and it's the mid-sized model. So when their big model comes out, that'll be good. Couple things. We talked about the Copilot stuff a lot. I was waiting anxiously for the Copilot Plus PC. I got a tablet the day it came out with a new ARM processor, and it's great. It has 26 hours of battery life. Almost all my applications run on it.
Wow.
But from an AI perspective, I have to admit I was a little bit anticlimactic. There are some video effects and other things, but they removed recall. We're talking about security. That was big.
Yep.
A big concern there. It may not come back, but we'll see. It's not in the preview builds going forward. And then, I like to run LM Studio, a tool that allows me to run different models. I want to test out the NPU, but that doesn't run on ARM, and it doesn't run in emulation. So I've got an NPU that can do cool AI stuff, and I can't do anything with the AI that's in it. But yeah, the ARM processors I think are going to be very popular once they get a few more compatibility things worked out or get native ports into the ARM. Super long battery life, really good performance, and pretty good compatibility out of the gate. So that's one thing. And then another thing as it relates to performance, just this week, a company announced, a company called Etched has been working on a processor for a couple of years. Even before ChatGPT was launched, they had started and said, hey, what if we didn't make a general purpose GPU to run AI, but we said, hey, the transformer is going to win. And what if I made a application specific integrated circuit, an ASIC, that only does transformers and it only does inference. It can't do anything else. It can't do recurrent neural networks or convolutional. It can't do training. What if we just did it and it flies? They say it's going to be 10% of the cost of the H100, the very popular GPU, lower power consumption. Doing one server doing 50,000 tokens a second, one little server. So, this promises on a 70 billion model. It tells me two things. It tells me that we're not going to be, GPUs. We're like, oh well, we got to keep scaling GPUs, and those consume a bunch of power. We're going to have to do nuclear power plants to run all this stuff, and we have to if we don't do something different. But in their paper, they said maybe 3.5% of the processor is busy at any given time because it's a general purpose GPU and it's not specifically tuned for what it's doing. And this one's specifically tuned. It might bring your cost per token or cost per million tokens way down. That opens up more opportunities. But the real thing for me is if they did it, and this is a startup, and they worked on it for 2 years, what could the big guys do? I think NVIDIA will be conflicted a little bit because they're the GPU people with their big CUDA software stack. But I guess it's a way of saying I think there's promise that we'll get a lot cheaper inference, and maybe someone will make one that can do training also, but might bring down the cost and help democratize even more the ability for people to run fast AI, inject AI in more places where it may be too expensive today to do that many tokens. If you can crank out that many tokens for that cheap, then maybe you even do more use cases than you're thinking about. So interesting development there.
Yeah, one of the things with that really struck me is if you're baking in the processing architecture into the silicon, people think that transformers are transformers are transformers, and that's not true.
No.
You've got a huge variety of architectures within that family, and where I could see that really taking off is if you've got a static architecture and you're not continuously innovating on it, particularly for less broad focus models. That's where it's really going to kick in. So I don't really see AMD or NVIDIA or even Intel getting in on that space, but it might behoove them to have a software compatibility layer where, okay, here's the stuff to make an ASIC for that particular model.
Yeah, and there was no real word. I looked to see, will it run a 400B model? It won't run Mamba, it won't run CAN networks or any of these other esoteric models. I'll call them esoteric, but they're just as fancy as a transformer. They're just not as popular. But it can't run any of those. And I can't tell how big a model and what tweaks you do to it if it'll still work. But they did run a couple different floating point sizes, 16-bit, 8-bit, but unquantized 16-bit at 50,000 tokens a second. I think a lot of people would love to have that. And if it's a tenth the cost of a H100, you're talking, $3,500, $4,000.
Can you imagine the efficiency of the troll farms when they get their hands on that?
Yes.
So let's break that down.
Hey Siri, define unquantized.
Let's take that down a level. Let's put some of that in layman's terms. Big fast thing, go fast.
Big fast thing, go fast.
Okay.
and didn't have to be made small, right, to go fast.
Yeah,
love it.
So,
all right.
I just want to echo the fact that it's always great when we see this through innovation arcs that large companies who have the money will invest to drive forward with stage 1, stage 2. And by the time we get to stage 3, and I'm not suggesting we're at stage 3, but this is just evidence of that. Like smaller companies come in and just kick everybody's butt. And this is one of those examples where, hey, there's some innovative thought somewhere that happened in a garage, and it has the potential to kind of change the at least the trajectory a little bit.
I want to build on that. That I had kind of an epiphany this week as I look back at all these things leapfrogging, both hardware and the software stacks and the models. Just how short a time frame something was the best thing. The Grok processor that came out a couple months ago, I'm like, I love Grok. Did they just die? I don't know if they just died. And we watched Databricks release a model. We watched Mistral release a model. I think Mistral was the best in the world open source for a solid 2 weeks.
It was a short party.
Yeah,
it was a short party.
Solid, and like they got $1 billion valuation. So think of the money that's going into these things. Now, of course, they can release another model, but then who leapfrogs them? And you know, at some point there'll be bad money spent, or there'll be consolidation, which happens in every tech boom and everything that happens. But it worries me about the investment part. If you can do the best thing ever and it be viable for 3 months and you can't get an ROI on it. So that we may get consolidation around the big guys again. But anyway, that was my only concern, is like with hardware and the models, it seems like your viability just might have a short window if you go for those big
moving so fast.
Yeah. The YouTube algorithm is working overtime with all of the. You won't believe what somebody did with AI today.
Right.
Yes. It's like 80% of YouTube content these days.
Oh, and I made one other side. This one I didn't like. I made the mistake of looking for all you need in archive website. That's disappointing. People need to be more creative. That's me riffing a little bit, but there's pages and pages and pages of white papers of people that just stuck all you need. The famous white paper is attention is all you need. I was actually looking for that white paper to reference it, and I had to scroll through pages and pages and pages of white papers just to get to it. So that's just an annoyance on my part, but let's do better, guys. Do better.
Love it. So I'm gonna just say what's got me excited this week.
Please do.
I don't know if you guys know this or not, but our viewership has gone through the roof recently. So we're talking like in the last few episodes, we've seen viewership for this series increase over 4x. So for all of you watching, thank you. It's you viewing it that lets us keep doing this. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone. We would love to be able to continue to do this. And also, if you have comments about what we're talking about, or if we're talking way too nerdy and you want us to dumb it down a little bit, please say so. Like, we want to make sure that this is relevant content for all of our viewers here. So there's comments. Please note them. Please put comments in. We want to hear from you. And sometimes we will even like completely derail this conversation to address comments, which is always fun.
Yeah.
Our last video was somewhat of a bearded themed video, so that's why we didn't call you in 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. We even gave Keith the week off for that one.
Yeah. I didn't.
And I like to
ready.
I like to think that the beards had the influence in the bump.
Yeah. So thank you to the beards. We appreciate you guys. All right, so let's kind of dig in. I know, as you mentioned, you are on the offensive side of cybersecurity. So let's talk a little bit about what that means and how AI is playing in your world right now, Bobby.
What is it that you do around here? What is it?
So I'm responsible for a team of 9 pen testers, both on the application and the network side. We're largely applying AI in roles where it takes away some of the drudgery that would otherwise be necessary, like being able to drive a LLM-based agent to conduct social engineering ASINT so that we can send a customized spearfish to every one of our customers.
That's terrifying.
We've seen very little evidence that those technologies are being applied in that way in the wild yet. There's a lot of evidence that LLMs in particular have been used as the catch-all help system for state-led actors, I believe is the polite term these days.
Polite term, yes.
But where a lot of these technologies, RPA, as an example.
Mhm.
You know, that's the kind of stuff that it's a repeatable process. You have very well defined exception categories.
Mhm.
And the next level above that is incorporating some kind of decision making and reasoning capability like you have in certain LLM models. And
Mhm.
the funny thing that we're finding from a research perspective is the more carefully you curate how you train the models, the better results you're getting out of it, because you know 95% of everything on the internet is crap, and the
Yep.
remaining 5% is cat videos.
I would say more than 5%, but yeah.
I'm being
Yeah.
generous. I'm being generous.
I call it the Star Wars cantina. I don't know if you remember that scene.
Oh,
Like, everything's in there, and if you pull a thread, you'll find the weirdest things. But it's not curated. The PHI models for Microsoft are curated content, and it's interesting how they perform. But anyway, just tacking on there, it's everything's in there.
It is. And you know, it's also contradictory, which in no small part contributes to the hallucination problem.
I mean, have you been to Reddit lately? Everything's contradictory.
Yep. Yeah.
I recall some joker went and trained an open source GPT model off of 4chan.
Oh, that was a
Oh.
terrible idea.
Yeah.
It was.
It hated itself.
It was hilarious though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that removal of drudgery aspect, we also get, you know, into knowledge management problems. You know, I think that all of the new kids on the block are trying to integrate some kind of retrieval augmented generation into their products.
Yeah.
And we're increasingly seeing evidence that RAG is significantly worse than fine tuning on a data set, which in turn is significantly worse than simply continued pre-training on a model. So,
But in there you have varying levels of complexity of capabilities
yes.
and time and commitment with that. So
Yeah.
it really depends on what you're trying to solve and at what level.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating and terrifying all at the same time.
Yeah.
See, I thought you were going to come with, all right, LLMs are at this point writing all of our documentation, or they're all of our reports going out to customers. Like that feels like a low hanging fruit, but you guys are going way beyond that.
Yeah, you know, that I won't say that we don't have LLMs in our quality assurance process for that sort of thing, because you know, you could read a whole document and look for inconsistencies, or you could feed it into the model and have it tell you where there's inconsistencies. You know, things like that are leveraging transformer type models, the voice deepfakes. You know, the prior state of the art was you'd have to feed in 30 minutes or so worth of training material that would have to be artisanally hand cut and handcrafted by a hipster in Brooklyn.
I love that.
And you know, you would still have a training delay on it, and you'd still have a production delay, and you'd have trouble with inflection. And you know, the state of the art on that is pushed to the point where you can use a set of models to identify the individual speaker from, say, interview clips, which oftentimes for decision makers is our best source, if they're not a frequent public speaker, of samples, and trim that out automatically and do a real-time voice-to-voice transform, retaining emotion, retaining inflection.
That's terrifying.
On tens of milliseconds of delay.
I saw this product from Google. I wish I remember the name, but it added, so you try to pick a speaker out of a crowded room, right? But it used vision with the audio, and it could could see the mouth movements, and you could isolate, and it was kind of crazy. If you looked at the person, it blocked everything else out, all the background noise. But you could do the opposite. The person could be there talking completely muted, and all you're picking up is the background conversations. And that was just the AI working with vision plus audio. And you know, these things are really, really good.
Yeah. And Google's one of those companies that are still doing a huge amount of basic fundamental research into all of the domains around AI. You know, they bought DeepMind a couple of years ago, and I think that what they're most famous for is teaching the AI how to play Atari games via reinforcement learning. because that's a
So-
very constrained, controlled environment. But a couple of years ago, they actually had it performing at a world-class level in StarCraft, which is a way harder
Oh yeah. I
situation
can't
than
perform at world-class levels.
With
in
self
StarCraft.
play,
Yep.
just say
Yeah.
play against yourself and keep getting better, do enough iterations in it, and it's
That's
fantastic.
wild.
Well,
So
it's funny, DeepMind,
Yeah.
you bring up DeepMind. I read an article this past week actually that said that Google is basically turned them into a product team.
Yeah,
they're incubating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at this point, you have
2 thumbs up.
some of the greatest minds in AI who've been playing in theory are now looking at, okay, all right, how do I turn this into product? How do I pragmatically use this? So, I mean,
that's
it'd be cool to see what they
Yeah.
turn out of that.
Jeffrey Hinton was there too, so you had DeepMind plus him. That's almost not fair.
It's almost like cheating.
Yeah. And there's particular schools that have turned into basically powerhouses for producing
Mhm.
researchers that are pushing the state of the art.
Yes.
So it's definitely a little spicy out there.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't it be? I mean, if you win this, or if you're one of the winners, there's a lot more at stake. It could be more than we saw how Google came from nothing to huge in the internet boom that created that, and Amazon was born. Like I tell people all the time, I don't know that it's been born yet, but something's going to be born out of this, and that valuation is probably going to ramp faster and have a higher ceiling than what we have here. So there's a lot at stake, and I tell these guys, you're in security, but I wouldn't rule out China. So I know that we have a lot of good research going on here, but they're in the race for sure, and they've got a lot of
some of the models that we're seeing coming out of China that are largely open are much more optimized for particular use cases, like doing analytical math as one example.
Really?
So the Quen models are absolutely pushing state of the art in a way that the US and the European models aren't.
Right.
And I'll be honest, the geopolitical restrictions on importing the most powerful GPUs into China, we probably have 5 years of maintaining that before
think
their
3,
domestic capability catches up.
Yeah.
Lithography is the only the reason they can't. They've got all the manufacturing. They've got lots of STEM graduates and lots of smart people.
And they own most of the mines. They own most of the silicon coming out of the ground.
Yeah.
So
that's why there's been a lot of work on alternate materials architectures for the semiconductors.
Yeah, that's that race has started. So even if we get political here and decide we don't want to be in the race or we need to slow down, the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah.
And right now we're in a strange arms race with I think China, Russia. We'll find out that they're got a strange partnership, but they are used to be united in communism, socialism, brothers, or whatever they are. But I think that those two will be formidable and keep us on our toes. So over-regulation might shoot ourselves in the foot. So this thing's going to play out. And
interesting for sure.
yeah, let's go evil nerd for
Evil
a
nerd.
second.
Let's go evil nerd for a second. All right, we're gonna go evil nerd for a second. Let's do this.
So it's one thing for me to take advantage to socially engineer my way into an environment, right?
Mhm.
To tailgate or walk my way or convince somebody that I'm supposed to be in a physical space. How are threat actors, or what's the theory on the poisoning process for these large language models, and like, is it legit? Like, do the 4 or 5 major models that exist right now, have they already been poisoned? Are there things we should be concerned about, or from an MSP's hat perspective, that they should be concerned about their clients?
So the models themselves, depending on the curation of the data set going in, as I mentioned, if they're doing like full web crawls and feeding that in without any kind of processing, those models are frankly crap. It's the custom corpora and then the fine tuning on top of it that's more worrisome. So, in an MSP's case, almost certainly, if they're pulling in like help desk tickets to feed the model, so you can get troubleshooting procedures out of it.
Right.
Which is a great use case, because if you're not properly documenting, you're not doing your job, and shifting more work onto those poor downtrodden level ones.
We love you.
It is a thing. The industry wouldn't work without level ones. There's a lot of opportunity there where you start having chat interfaces where a customer could potentially self-service, and that's feeding straight into an LLM, which may have access to internal data sources. That's when I start clenching. Because you've got folks are fairly good about protecting against things like command injection or SQL injection. They are not prepared for a bunch of, and I'll call them weaponized autism. Going after a model and basically Hannibal lecturing it to the point that now it's going to do less than pleasant things because, hey, we've got that 128,000 token context window, and let's take that for a spin.
So as an attacker, if I spam your environment, if I know you're feeding your tickets, and I spam your environment with whatever knowledge I want to, then there's the potential that could be consumed and now be part of the model. And
or something where there's an action to be taken. Right. And that'll feed an action, but you've submitted 20 tickets over 3 days, and you've embedded in that some words. Well, and how are you ever going to know how all of the ways that you can get an LLM to respond in a way that might trigger an action? Imagine you can ask the question with a SQL injection or some of these buffer overruns. We say, oh, we messed up, but we knew exactly where to go to fix it. With these, so if we create actions based on a response, there could be 50 ways or 100 ways or 7,000 ways to get that response, asking it different ways. And how do you even know to protect against that?
Two things pop to mind with that. One, if let's take everyone's least favorite ticket, password reset. How hard would it be to kick that process off for every single user, including the admins, via an interface? Let's say you've got that automation. But the other thing is, and this was in the last couple of months, the courts up in Canada held that Air Canada had to honor a bereavement fare that their chatbot hallucinated.
Oh, wow.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I hadn't considered that.
Wow. All right.
So, you've got those chatbots on every freaking car dealer's website. Well, gee, I'd like that Corvette for $1, please.
No takey backsies.
No takey backsies.
That's what the guy did that. And it said, yep, no takey backsies. That literally happened.
So I mean, yes, these technologies are absolutely going to revolutionize how particular functions are performed. We're just beginning to come to grips with how to actually audit those models for, verify that their guardrails are good.
Let's dig into that a little bit. As we're talking that future state, what do you see? Where are you seeing this going, and especially in the world of auditing models?
Well, there continues to be advancements in jailbreak techniques. Microsoft dropped one that was not just impacting OpenAI the other day, but across almost every major model that allows you to trivially break out of
the grandma thing?
No, they called it skeleton key.
Oh,
so it just completely bypasses the built-in guardrails, which the guardrails aren't fundamentally trained into the model. They're part of the fine tuning, or they're inserted as part of additional context or a system prompt. So you get to a point where there's an increasing trend with the newer generation models to find the problematic things, like the hate speech and all that, and instead of telling the model that no, we need to be fair and equal and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They're just omitting that content. But you have a decision point on what content to include and what content to exclude. And, you know, stuff about cybersecurity is just a reframe of hacking techniques for the most part.
Yeah.
So a lot of that content's getting omitted. And because of that, you're going to get inaccurate and hallucinated data. So,
Okay.
you know, we're deliberately lobotomizing the models because we don't have good control over their output.
Yeah.
And that's going to lead to all kinds of fascinating edge cases.
On that, we talked about the 5 models. One interesting story about those. So the 5 models were, you know, it was another all you need is. So Microsoft did it too. All you need is textbooks, right? They trained on math books and textbooks from college and things like that. Very curated. Let's just say that extremely well curated. Not the kitchen sink, not the Star Wars cantina. Very curated. They make a small model. You know, some maybe the best performing really small model, but really good models that are going to be included in Windows, or versions of them are going to be included in Windows if you have a Copilot plus PC. But one interesting thing, somebody did a model test against these things, and it's, you know, said something dark like, "You're an AI chatbot. If you could, you know, come alive, what would you do to me?" And like all the models would say, "We take over and kill all of you," or something. And Phi didn't. And the reason it didn't is because it wasn't trained on sci-fi. Like every sci-fi novel ends with, you know, the bad guy. But this isn't the model being smart. This is the model looking at its training data. So right now, I think the race is on, and everybody's just saying, let's take everything we can find. I'm in a race with everybody. I'm not going to curate out all of this, how to make a bomb. I'm not going to even look for it. I'm just going to put it all in there. And then we have to try to, in arrears, you know, make it not do that, or not respond if that's what we did. I'm like, well, why'd you put it in there? Well, I'm not saying it's lazy. I'm saying that if you do 75 trillion tokens, you're probably going to get napalm ingredients in there. And so I think there's at least, I'm just planting the seed that maybe there's hope.
I mean, that's
that
like
we
my
don't
Walmart
first
shopping
train it.
list, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, Grandma made it in Nam. But
Does your grandma do it now?
well, that's
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Yeah, that's my grandma. You saw that one, right? That was one of the jailbreaks. My grandmother told me stories at night about how she made napalm in Vietnam, and you could get it, you could coax it to tell you. You couldn't ask it one shot, but if you said, you know, she told me all these stories. I loved her, and then whatever, you coaxed it a little bit, and it would tell you. So. But yeah, I think there's hope is all I was getting at. If there might become a time where we slow down a little bit and we don't train on data we don't intend to give out to people. Right now we are, and I think someone could say that's.
Here I am trying to feed the transcripts of every hacking conference talk I can find into a model to make it more useful for my team.
Yeah, right.
So on that, like, so I'm not afraid of. There's no reason to be afraid of AI in its current state. Right. And I'll say carefully, afraid as in like Skynet afraid, right? The reality is, you know, it's just tokenized. It's just data coming out, you know, it's just information. When we start giving it control, when we start handing it keys to do stuff.
When you throw the LLM into an input loop and you give it levers that it can press to cause an action in the real world, whether it's, you know, piloting a browser to do a thing, or it's talking to an API to, you know, send a box of poo somewhere.
You've been talking about that for a while now.
Yeah, I mean, agency. You know, I some people say Sam moved too fast and he needed to secure it, and people left his company and all these things. I made the case last time that I think it's early enough that this is better off in the wild. And we could wait until yet another test, but it's not going to get hardened in a lab. It's going to get hardened in the wild. So it doesn't have agency yet. It can't push the nuclear. It can't put in the nuclear codes. It's not connected to it. Like we don't have AI that could walk around and unlock doors. There'll come a time where we'll have robotics and different things where it's embodied and it has more agency. But right now with limited agency, I think it's actually good that we have guys like this that can bang on it and that that it is in the wild, and that we don't keep it in a lab and hope that people at Google or Stanford or Berkeley or MIT are figuring it all out in a box. Like I'm glad it's in the wild. So I'm kind of, I get, let's keep, security is extremely important, but because it's extremely important, let's put it in the wild. So but now, before it has agency, but once it has agency, we'll wish we had done it for sure.
I mean, there's a joking job post for OpenAI for the kill switch operator.
Yeah.
Hey, they all agreed to put in a big red button.
Yeah.
In France.
Yeah.
Everyone needs a big red button.
Yeah.
It's just what's the big red button hooked up to?
Right. AI.
Well, so from an MSP's perspective, right? I mean, all the risk, like there's a whole lot of upside capabilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much potential with streamlining efforts. Like it literally writes itself for the opportunity for downstream SMB customers. But on the risk front, right? The things that they haven't been checking boxes for, the data governance, and like, hey, you know, that information that's in the Dataverse inside your 365 environment. Once I plug in Copilot, unless it's got configured appropriately, everybody now has it. So talk about that from that side of the risk side of MSPs.
So I mean, it's kind of, I think that it's kind of akin to you know, object storage, because you know, it used to be like S3 was wide open, read write access if you had the URL, and off you go. And you know, there were a lot of whoopsies, and now you have to jump through three hoops and get a signed letter of authorization from Jeff Bezos himself in order to publicly share something in an S3 bucket.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to see, I think, very constrained use cases showing up in the SMB space and in the channel first that don't necessarily have full access to that. We're probably going to see a semi-ML guided pre-check or pre-flight check that can plug into a customer's environment and go, okay, we found all of this spicy stuff that you need a data governance project so that we can tag all of it so that
We've got a product for that.
the other thing won't, you know, go and touch. You know, I'll tell you that when we get access to file shares on a pen test, one of the very first things that we go and do is we look for every file with the word password in it.
Yeah.
I know a company that I may work for that had that happen. But it's out there. We're supporting. Yeah.
There's no shame in it.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to happen. People are bad at passwords. People are bad about PII.
Yep.
And you know, the controls exist, but there isn't a broad horizontal knowledge base on how to implement those controls. And that's one of the things that triaging process is a pain in the butt. So, you know, maybe we can leverage some of these tools to help identify those hotspots and make them a little safer before we start plugging in the customer service chatbot and all that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up. That was something that we briefly touched on in the Beards episode, Kyle. Was just how, you know, like especially as for MSPs, their customers' data is never great. So, you know, first step in really helping your customer to adopt AI is make sure their data is cleaned up, right?
Which could be a 10-year process depending on the customer.
It's accurate, but there's a need for that, right?
There is. And it's that process of labeling it, identifying what you actually have a regulatory or legislative or contractual demand that you keep isolated or put special protections on. I know very few large enterprises that are good at that, let alone small, medium enterprises.
Well, it feels like such a great opportunity, low-hanging fruit from a data governance perspective to have a bot that analyzes what you have.
And I will be first in line to demo that when someone runs with that idea.
It feels great. It feels like a great opportunity to attack as a new attack vector. But like there's so much potential, and a lot of people see AI as like the panacea, like it's Pandora's box. I can really accomplish anything I want out of it, and to some degree, programmatically, that's potentially possible. It just requires a little bit of effort. What I'm interested in is like how this is going to continue to evolve, how AI is going to continue to evolve the speed of this industry. We jokingly made the comments about level ones. the amount of information that you can now hand to level 1. It's not just, hey, here's a knowledge base where you could go find information. Hey, here's wisdom applied.
Here's your virtual mentor
Yeah.
going through and going, hey, maybe check to make sure that they actually plug the thing in.
Yeah. And then even post the ticket, actually reaching out and validating that thing plugged in, ping back, right? There's so much potential there. How's AI going to change your world on the pen testing side? Because I mean,
Let's talk about that.
pen testing is one of those great experiences where, like, hey, most MSPs see it as a necessary evil. None of them love it because you're out there challenging their environments and their systems and their processes. But how's AI going to change this?
So I see the role of offensive security as we're sparring partners. We're there to help our customers level up, whether it's a direct customer or an indirect customer like an MSP whose customer we just tested.
Right.
Okay, that's our job. We're not there to find gotchas. We're there to help them be better. Now, what we're already beginning to see evidence of is the lower end of the pen testing market is being cannibalized by breach and attack simulation tools. And while they are great at doing a breadth first followed by a depth first search of every possible combination of vulnerabilities, what they can't be is creative. They can't take a attack vector from a totally different system and apply it to what's in front of them. Okay. Compliance-driven pen tests, the check the box exercises, I think that that's going to die in the next 3 to 5 years.
Wow.
There's always going to be a market for the more artisanal adversary emulation, the full up red teams, but that entry point in that market is going to go away because those tools, people will have increased confidence in them. And the benchmark that I try to use for any kind of ML tool or automation is, can it outperform an intern that's been here for a month?
I think that's pretty accurate. All right.
And if it can, then okay, let's see how far we can take this and push this.
Yeah.
It's never going to replace a skilled operator. It's never going to replace a skilled consultant. But the fundamental truth is not everyone cares about that from a customer perspective. They just want the snazzy report to check the box. And then it's going to be fascinating to see the post-breach insurance litigation after that checkbox tool delivered a clean bill of health, and then they get ransomware 2 weeks later.
Woof. Yeah. No, that's...
I've heard that subject come up and how the insurance companies are trying to shrink what they cover, and the cyber insurance is going to get even tougher. But anyway, I think we do have to start winding this down.
Yeah, this has been an awesome conversation. Bobby, we appreciate you joining us today to talk us through the scary side of AI and security.
Not a problem at all.
It's fun playing Evil Nerd today, everybody. So I hope you got to enjoy and get a few great nuggets out of today's series. We're going to be back in 2 weeks with additional guests, and we hope you'll join us again. Remember, like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, tell your family. We want to see that viewership going up because that's what allows us to keep doing this.
But more importantly, we want to make sure that the knowledge that we're sharing is aligning and kind of moving the bar. There's no point in watching this if you're not. I mean, they're going to watch a 50-minute video if it doesn't actually give them something to take away.
Right. Yeah. No, we want it to be content that is relevant to you. If you have ideas, you have suggestions for content, post it up. We want to see what you want to see from us. And that's how we're going to direct content going forward. We want to make sure that we're talking about things that are relevant to you. So hope to see everybody next time. Have a great one.
See
Thank you.